welcome. Raise Your Inner Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the mental game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. So how are you this week? Having fun following the news? It is a little funny in places, not overall. Maybe having fun not following the news, that works too. Things are pretty solid and normal here, normal weather. Not that nice, but not that bad either. Nothing particularly newsworthy with the fan this week, just in the groove, living life. Pickleball's going well, had some epic games last night. Wow, dragging a little bit today, but all good. No rhythm issues with the heart, which is excellent. Someone is looking at buying our Tesla. Should find out this week about that. Honestly, still torn on that. We know we're not making a statement, owning it, driving it. We'll see. We may end up keeping it after all. Anyway, plenty to talk about this week. No changes there. The Signalgate mess and fallout. Alina Habba for U.S. Attorney. That's unbelievable and insane. The latest list of terrible things Trump and Elon and Republicans have been up to. That is an ongoing, never-ending project. A great exercise to be more present and engaged. Our challenge of the week. And a couple new recommendations. All right, we'll start with ups and downs. So what gave me a lift this week and what things were pulling me down? One nice up. I had an old friend. We played together in bands for years and made a lot of music together over the years. He's actually quite an accomplished writer and artist in his own right, much higher level activities than I saw in my career. But he texted me out of the blue the other day about one of my songs that he finds especially inspiring, still after all these years. I think it was on my first record. The song was The Best in Us, so like 25 years ago. And that just felt really great, as you can imagine. That was a lovely gift. Also feeling really good about the new writing this week. I started redoing another old song, and this one's actually fun. It's come together really well. Especially fun to have an old song like this feel like it's, finally becoming what it could be, This whole project of reworking old songs that weren't quite there has been really interesting and satisfying. That's a nice thing. The marketing program I've been talking about is also getting exciting. Built the landing page this week. Got a few more pieces to put in place, but possible the new campaign could go live next week. And it's just been sort of thrilling to see how well things are coming together with that, which is still funny given that none of it will matter if it doesn't work. But it just feels like it's much more likely to work, which is exciting. Anyway, maybe next week we'll start to find out. Oh, this is a funny one. I heard a story this week about Celine Dion that really lit me up. So the story came from David Foster. He's just a huge music producer, if you don't know, like 16 Grammys. Just a giant in that world. Not my style, generally, including Celine Dion for that matter, though I did love that Titanic theme. Anyway, the story is they were out to dinner. They were working on a record at the time. She was due to record vocals the next day. And she has a policy to not speak for 24 hours before recording to make sure her voice is in the best possible shape. Talking is actually one of the hardest things on our voice. So she just doesn't talk for 24 hours before recording, which is such an extreme thing to do. But I loved it so much because, for one, it's just super smart. But more so, I love that level of commitment. Whatever it takes, no matter what anyone thinks. I'm super impressed by that. But the story is, they're having dinner. Robert De Niro comes over, wants to meet her. And for our generation, he's the biggest actor there is, right? Just a huge icon. Of course you want to meet him. It's a thrill. So De Niro comes over. She's still not talking. She's happy to meet him, but she's writing her comments on a napkin. I love that. Now and then you hear similar stories of really the sacrifice people make to operate or compete at that level. And you can make the case, I suppose, that it's not the greatest life, but I still find it inspiring to hear stories of commitment like that. So that was fun. For my downs, the main thing has been starting to hear more stories of the people being illegally detained. They're just horrifying. I mean, can you imagine what that must be like? You're going about your day, living your life. This one guy who's a barber, makeup artist, self-described as gay, clearly not a gang member, but he has a conspicuous tattoo And apparently that's all it takes. Next thing he knows, he's in Ecuador. Never been there. In this massive prison, like 40,000 people in this prison. It's famous for horrible conditions, and forced labor. Why is he there? How is he going to survive that? How does this make us safer? Just yesterday, maybe you saw this, the video of this young woman just grabbed off the street. Masked men, no uniforms. She had no idea who they were. Grabbed her, handcuffed her, stuck her in this van, took her away. Imagine how terrifying that would be. And her crime? She wrote a pro-Palestinian op-ed in the paper. She's a Turkish PhD student on a student visa. This is just pure police state cruelty. It's happening right now, and it's just unbelievable. It makes me sick to be associated with it. It's illegal. They don't care. I assume it'll get overturned, but that takes time. In the meantime, it sends this chill over everything. And the Republicans, at best, say nothing. At worst, they revel in it. Aren't we clever? Aren't we strong? Making America great again. Making America great again. Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, makes a video standing in front of the prisoners in the cage in Ecuador. She flies there for this photo op with the prisoners behind her. And a bunch of other people, right-wingers, did the same thing. The prisoners were required to be in the videos. It's just so obscene. The good news, if there is some, is that I think all this is waking up a lot of people. It reminds me a little of the statement attributed, maybe true, maybe not, to Admiral Yamamoto of Japan after they attacked Pearl Harbor, beginning of World War II. He supposedly said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve," which turned out to be true, right? My hope and my feeling is that's starting to happen in our country now. Most people who voted for Trump didn't vote for this. They believed he wouldn't do all the extreme things he was saying in the campaign. We did, right? I mean, everyone I know and follow did, but most people didn't, and especially his voters. But now that he is doing all of it, and worse, and they're seeing for themselves the gross incompetence and chaos and cruelty of this administration, I believe they're starting to wake up. You're seeing that in the protests around the country. There was a special election in Pennsylvania. In a district, Trump won by 20 points to just flip to a Democrat. And they're only going to continue to build. Anyway, I hope I'm right about that. In the meantime, still a pretty big down to see all the damage they're doing, and especially these people in these illegal deportations. All right, those are ups and downs for this week. Next up, top stories. The big story, of course, this week is what's being called Signalgate, after the app Signal. I'm sure you've heard Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, and the entire senior national security team, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, Director of the CIA, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, literally the top people in our government on national security. So they're setting up this group chat in the Signal app to discuss the pending attacks on the Houthis in Yemen, who keep attacking Israel. They're supported by Iran, attacking ships in the Gulf. And they somehow accidentally invite the journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, into the chat. So he's seeing all their comments, all the details of this pending attack. This is the most highly classified kind of information there is. If it got out, it puts our people and our methods in direct danger. Normally, if you're involved in a conversation like this, you do it in a secure facility, on government-issued secure devices. You don't use your private phone or a commercially available app, and you don't share with people who don't have top secret clearance. So this is literally criminal on several counts. Using the app is actually criminal. Sharing the information, even by accident, it's illegal. If we had a functioning Justice Department, they would be investigated and charged. Anyone else in any position would be disciplined, fired, court-martialed, lose their security clearance, maybe jailed. But in Trump world, never mind. Not only has no one been even disciplined yet, as far as I know, but they're denying it even happened. that the material was classified, and, of course, blaming the journalist, calling him scum, saying he's known for pushing hoaxes, just the most disgusting kind of baseless attacks that they do all the time. It's beyond ridiculous. It's a farce. We've all seen the text chain. It is clearly and obviously dangerous and classified information. You just cannot believe the hubris and the shamelessness of these people to try to lie their way out of this one. It's so wild. Speaking of lying, Tulsi Gabbard and several other of these senior people, they lied under oath to the Senate. Also illegal, right? They said no secrets were shared, no classified information. But then Goldberg released the text. We all saw him, and it was obviously all a lie under oath. The only conclusion you can make, I think, beyond that they truly are just simply incompetent and unqualified. This is what happens when you put people in important positions who don't know what they're doing, right? They make mistakes, and mistakes that really matter. But still, you could make a mistake and say, oh boy, this was bad. We really screwed up here. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure this never happens again, right? I mean, that would be reasonable and responsible. People could accept that. But to lie to Congress under oath and pretend it's not what we can see with our own eyes and keep doubling and tripling down and playing that old blame the journalist card, that says to me they don't care. They don't believe they need to be honest with Congress and the American public. They don't have to live up to any standards, legal, ethical, moral, nothing. They're free to do whatever they want, period. That's what I think it shows. And it just pervades the entire administration. And that's where we are. I'm hopeful there are still real consequences to come from this. Not holding my breath, but hopeful. And by the way, remember, I've been talking about the military, watching all this, and let's just say not having infinite patience for it. You have to imagine that this is the kind of thing that really gets their attention, right? Putting their own people and operations in jeopardy. Speaking of which, another awful thing Pete Hegseth did this week. This is unbelievable in a different way. He officially terminated all requirements, all efforts to minimize civilian casualties in operations, meaning it's okay to kill civilians now. And you saw some of that in this attack. They killed a lot of innocent people, and apparently that's just part of the program now. I imagine there are some people in the military who welcome this, and not because they're cruel necessarily. I'm just sure there are some times, frustrating times, when an important target gets away because of our policies on protecting civilians. But I also expect there are top leaders who understand how wrong-headed and dangerous this is for our position in the world over time. This does not help us in the long term. Speaking of incompetence, the next big item, this one just, I mean, you never find a bottom. You always hope there's a bottom. It just keeps getting worse, goes farther and farther down. So Trump nominated Alina Habba, one of his personal attorneys, maybe you've seen her in action, to be the U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey. This is an important and powerful position, and she is totally unqualified for it. I mean, literally, she's never been a prosecutor. She has very little experience with criminal law at all, really. She's a terrible, unethical lawyer. She was fined like $1 million by the court for filing a frivolous lawsuit on Trump's behalf. The judge tore her apart for her behavior. He said, maybe it was a she. Anyway, they said, here we are confronted with a lawsuit that should never have been filed, which was completely frivolous, both factually and legally, and which was brought in bad faith for an improper purpose, end quote. That's about as bad as it gets for a lawyer short of losing her license. So the only real qualification she has is a willingness to do and say anything for Trump, and he wants her to be a U.S. attorney. So again, nothing to do with competence. They complain so much about DEI and merit-based, and one after another, they put people in all these positions who are the least qualified people imaginable and historically to ever have the positions. It's just so ridiculous. So the one thing is, though, U.S. attorneys need to be confirmed, right? So this will ultimately be on Republican senators. Will they confirm her? Can they possibly do that and live with themselves? Are they convinced yet of the dangers of putting incompetent Trump cult members in powerful positions? We'll see. I'd like to think they are regretting the Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard votes, but you never know. I wouldn't want to bet much on Republicans doing the right thing. Other items this week, always a long list. Normally this would be a top story all by itself, literally trying to shut down the Department of Education. I don't understand this. Apparently Republicans have been wanting to do this for decades. I don't know why. Is helping kids with special needs bad? Are school lunches bad when we know how helpful they are for learning? Do we just not care about all our kids? Are college loans bad? I genuinely don't understand their beef with the Department of Education. We'll see where this one goes. It's a pretty unpopular position with public. And of course, they can't do it. One of those, so many of these presidential orders are it's just not how it works. They're just not legal. He can't abolish the department by himself, but he can do a lot of things to gut it, basically, and have it just not be functioning. Anyway, we'll see. This next one actually freaked me out. I'm still not sure how true it is or what exactly it means, but there was a report that Elon Musk was going to get a briefing on our plans for a potential war with China. I mean, I cannot imagine, first, why would that even happen? What could he possibly need that information for? Speaking of the most secret of top secret information. But way worse, this guy, Elon, is a huge espionage risk. He does a ton of business in China. He's massively dependent on good relations with that government, who, by the way, is our main adversary, right? And is actively planning for war with the West over Taiwan in the next 5 years. They've been way out front about that. You don't think they would pressure him to provide them that information if he had it? And you don't think he would happily give it to them to get what he wants? He doesn't honestly seem all that patriotic to me. I just cannot believe this is even true. I hope it's not what it sounds like. I'll do some more checking on that. In the dumb and corrupt category, our Commerce Secretary, multi-billionaire, by the way, he goes on TV, and first, it's not a joke, he tells people to buy Tesla stock, and he pushes it hard. Makes a pretty long-winded case why, it's cheaper as it's ever going to be, it's going to blow up, you really got to get into it now while you can. Why would he do that? How is that even allowed in his official position as Commerce Secretary to make individual stock recommendations? And by the way, the stock is not a good buy right now, depending on your perspective. It's massively overpriced. So this was just pure insider corruption for his buddy Elon. But then, this man of the people went on to say that seniors, if they're not getting their Social Security payments for some reason, which, by the way, is their money, right? Not the government's. But if they're having trouble getting payment, they shouldn't complain about it. And those who do complain are probably crooks. He actually said that. It's the scammers who make the most noise when the money dries up. What is he even talking about? There's a whole nother discussion, right, about just Trump's attacks on law firms and colleges. That is actually deeply troubling on the democracy and rule of law front. Also does massive damage to research and science in our country. Just really self-defeating. Anyways, I just read this evening about 3 professors and researchers from Yale who just took offers from a university in Canada, and specifically left because they said the environment here is just getting too restrictive and fascist and concerning. And that's just the beginning, right? Brain drain's a real thing. The IRS, here's a good one. IRS is cutting back audits of wealthy taxpayers, which is the exact opposite of what you would do if you want to make things work better and be more fair. But they don't want more fair. They want more favors for their rich friends. And that's a good one. This is obviously a pattern of theirs. Trump this week made a pitch for his scam crypto coin from his official White House account. The president is not supposed to do that, right? Conflict of interest, corruption. There's so many ways that is supposed to be not allowed. But they don't care. Again, when the enforcement in Justice Department, when you control that too, you can do whatever you want. Speaking of corruption, it also turns out that his beef with Panama is likely not actually about the canal and never was. Back in 2018, a Trump hotel in Panama went under and was given back to the owners, and he's been pissed about it ever since. And now he's bullying them about the canal. This guy doesn't care about leaving the country or the world. All he wants is the power to punish his enemies and do whatever he wants. On the pushback front, though, I touched on this earlier, but an event in Greeley, Colorado with Bernie Sanders and AOC drew 11,000 people when they expected 2,000, and that's the Trump district. And then in Denver the next day, they drew over 30,000 people. People are waking up, and that's a hopeful sign for sure. Canadians are boycotting American vacations and businesses. Flight bookings to the U.S. are down like 70% from this time last year. Businesses of all kinds are going to be unhappy about that, you can be sure. And there are even some Republicans starting to make noises about this Signalgate thing. The denials are just so laughable. Even they are starting to speak out a little bit, starting to show some small cracks in their armor. But little cracks can grow into bigger ones, and sometimes pretty quickly, so I'm taking that as hopeful news as well. Anyway, that's top stories for this week. The plot thickens, as they say. And by the way, if you enjoy these segments, do please take a moment, give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It is a big help in reaching to new listeners, so appreciate that very much. All right, next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about the idea of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. As much as you can, keep your focus off of things you can't do anything about and on things you can do something about. That's super helpful for our mental health and happiness. This week, it's time to return to the Stoics, specifically the famous saying, Memento Mori, Memento Mori, remember that you die. We don't think about death much. I certainly don't. It's an unpleasant topic. We want to avoid it as much as possible. I'm right there with you on that if you feel that way. At the same time, we are all going to die. It's only a question of when and how. I'm reminded of my favorite Elon Musk quote back from when I was a fan, and he didn't seem, so crazy and dangerous. You may know his biggest dream above all else is to get human civilization established on Mars. And so he said one time, I'd love to die on Mars, just not on impact. That's funny. But there it is, right? It's going to happen. When and how makes all the difference. But the Stoic idea of keeping in mind the fact that we die is just a very helpful thing to do. I'm generally creeped out thinking about death and dying, but this particular exercise I find consistently uplifting. Now, there are many ways to use this idea to reframe your thinking about your daily life. My favorite is to ask myself, is how I'm being right now, how I'd want to be remembered. I imagine you've heard me talk about this before. And the fascinating part of that is how often the answer is no. And it's not a huge gap. It's not like I'm doing something I'd be mortified by. It's just when I look at how I'm being in that moment, it's almost never as fully alive and engaged as I would like to be and think it could be. Just in the small context of what I'm working on in that moment, I'm not fully in it. I'm a little below that, a little more lazy, a little distracted, a little loosey-goosey, And the point is not to beat myself up about that. It's really just to observe that it's true, that left to our natural impulses, we will not live fully engaged. We're wired to not do that, to conserve energy, to play it safe. So if we do want to live our best life, for lack of a better term, one will feel genuinely proud of, it will by definition require consistent, intentional, upward effort on our part. We need to pick ourselves up to where we want to be. It will never happen by itself. So that's a great reminder, I think. But it's also not the main message the saying is meant to communicate. The idea there is, you might not be alive tomorrow, right? You really might not. It's not morbid. It's just an observable fact. Our lives could end at any moment. And that's especially true as we get older. So given that reality, let's just make the most of our days. Don't take them for granted. Don't live them in a way we would regret. Just engage with life and notice and appreciate every day we have. That's a pretty great message. And I think especially when we're so inundated with depressing, worrying news, all of that out there can be true, but it's also true that we're alive, and it's great to be alive. So I love this saying, Memento Mori. I think I first heard it from Ryan Holiday, and he has it tattooed on the inside of his forearm where he sees it all the time. That's too much for me, but I can see the value in the reminder. So that's Inner Game Gold this week from the Stoics, Memento Mori. Remember that you die, live accordingly. All right, next up, our challenge of the week. No surprise, let's spend some Memento Mori time this week. At least once, and up to as many times as you might find helpful, sit down, ask yourself, is how I was today how I would want to be remembered? If you're like me, the answer is probably no, not quite there. So then think about why. What are you seeing when you say that? And then what can you do tomorrow to be better? That's a great exercise, sort of at a higher level. And then moment to moment, if you can remember 2 or 3 times a day during the day, ask yourself right in that moment, is how I'm being right now how I'd want to be remembered? And if the answer is no, see if you can't pick yourself up to being the way you would want to be remembered. And again, it's probably a subtle shift, right? But you still know exactly what I'm talking about. I bet you know the difference I mean, and it feels great to lift yourself up there and be in that higher place. Anyway, that's our challenge this week. 2 different Memento Mori exercises. One, a daily recap, the other, in the moment. All right, enjoy that this week. Next up, highly recommended. I talked about this author before. It's John Sandford. He's written a lot of books, crime thrillers generally. This is one from his Prey series called Lethal Prey. They feature a detective from Minnesota, Lucas Davenport. This one's really good. It's a great combination of tense and intriguing, and also it's very funny. His characters and their dialogue are the best. But the bigger thing I take from them, and I know I talked about this before, but it's just the huge difference a good author makes. I know good's subjective. I should probably say authors I like, but it really is just night and day. The last book I was reading seemed like for forever, science fiction. It ended up being fine. It was interesting enough, but it was a bit of a slog to get through. I never looked forward to picking it up. This one I can barely put down. I just can't get over the difference. Anyway, that's been fun. The biggest entertainment item this week for us was the season finale of Severance. And by the way, if you haven't watched it yet, you might want to skip ahead. I would hate to ruin any of it for you. I still cannot recommend it highly enough. One of the all-time great shows, so slight spoiler alert. But anyway, we've been looking forward to the finale, as you know. Also dreading it a bit. I was afraid of being disappointed. The finale of season 1 was so amazing. It was hard to imagine living up to that. So we had our usual party with the cousins, always fun at that level. But I must say, I was a little disappointed. Now, I've been thinking about it since then. I do feel better than I did that night. It did resolve some important things. It was certainly exciting and surprising, and it raises some really interesting questions for next season. I guess the big difference is last season finale, the feeling was just total hope and excitement. This season, it ended with just less of that. Right? It was not nearly as hopeful, mostly just tension and intrigue and more questions. Still super great. Love the show. Can't wait for next season. Highly recommended. Just hoping the wait is not as long for season 3. All right, that's our show for this week. Reminder, if you could use some help staying focused and positive with everything that's going on, this is a great time to raise your inner game. Check out the book. Check out our Sports Academy trainings if you're an athlete or a parent or a coach of an athlete. Helps you navigate all the crazy that's going on now and also just be the person you want to be going forward in all areas of your life. It's a beautiful thing. And you can learn all about it at raiseyourinnergame.com. All right. Thank you, as always. Have a great week. Let me know any questions. Otherwise, keep up the good work. I'll see you next time.